tiptoes to reach the cookie jar on the counter behind him. David Chen sat at the oak table where thousands of family dinners had been shared, his newspaper spread before him like a shield, his coffee growing cold in the mug Maya had made him in 7th grade ceramics class, the mug that read, "World's Best Dad," in her careful, hopeful handwriting. The irony wasn't lost on her now. "Dad, I'm not being sensitive. What you said to Rebecca was completely inappropriate." Maya's voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady. She stepped into the kitchen, her bare feet finding the cold tiles that had witnessed so many midnight snack raids, so many whispered conversations with her mother, so many moments when this house felt like home instead of a battlefield. Rebecca Martinez sat at the breakfast bar, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face as she stared down at her untouched plate of scrambled eggs. Maya's best friend since 3rd grade, the girl who had slept over countless times, who knew where every creaky floorboard was, who had been like a second daughter to the Chen family. Rebecca's shoulders were drawn tight, her usual bright energy dimmed to something fragile and wounded. "I was just giving her a compliment," David said, finally looking up from his paper, his reading glasses perched on his nose the way they had for as long as Maya could remember, the same glasses that had helped him read bedtime stories, check homework, and apparently make uncomfortable observations about teenage girls' bodies. "She's grown up to be a beautiful young woman. There's nothing wrong with noticing that." Maya felt something volcanic rise in her chest, the same feeling she'd been pushing down for months now, maybe years. The feeling that started as a small seed of discomfort and had grown into something that made her skin crawl every time her father looked at her friends a certain way, every time he made comments that felt wrong, even if she couldn't articulate why. "Dad, I'm not being sensitive. What you said to Rebecca was completely inappropriate." Maya's voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady. She stepped into the kitchen, her bare feet finding the cold tiles that had witnessed so many midnight snack raids, so many whispered conversations with her mother, so many moments when this house felt like home instead of a battlefield. Rebecca Martinez sat at the breakfast bar, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face as she stared down at her untouched plate of scrambled eggs. Maya's best friend since 3rd grade, the girl who had slept over countless times, who knew where every creaky floorboard was, who had been like a second daughter to the Chen family. Rebecca's shoulders were drawn tight, her usual bright energy dimmed to something fragile and wounded. "I was just giving her a compliment," David said, finally looking up from his paper, his reading glasses perched on his nose the way they had for as long as Maya could remember, the same glasses that had helped him read bedtime stories, check homework, and apparently make uncomfortable observations about teenage girls' bodies. "She's grown up to be a beautiful young woman. There's nothing wrong with noticing that." Maya felt something volcanic rise in her chest, the same feeling she'd been pushing down for months now, maybe years. The feeling that started as a small seed of discomfort and had grown into something that made her skin crawl every time her father looked at her friends a certain way, every time he made comments that felt wrong, even if she couldn't articulate why. "Dad, I'm not being sensitive. What you said to Rebecca was completely inappropriate." "What you said to Rebecca was completely inappropriate. He's been making comments like this about my friends for years. About me, too. Remember when he said I was getting curvy in all the right places in front of Jake Morrison? Remember how uncomfortable that was?" Linda's face went pale, and I saw recognition flicker in her mother's eyes, the kind of recognition that suggested this conversation had been brewing in Linda's mind for longer than anyone wanted to admit. "David, maybe we should talk about this."
"There's nothing to talk about," David snapped, his newspaper crackling as his grip tightened. "I'm not allowed to notice that children grow up. I'm not allowed to be proud that Maya and her friends have become confident young women. When did being observant become a crime?" Maya felt Rebecca flinch beside her. Rebecca, who had been coming to this house since they were 8 years old, who had called David Uncle Dave until sometime in high school when she quietly stopped. Maya hadn't thought about when or why that change happened until now. "Rebecca," Maya said softly, "do you want to tell them how those comments make you feel?" Rebecca's hands twisted in her lap, her knuckles white. I don't want to cause problems." You're not causing problems, Maya said fiercely. Dad's comments are the problem. This is ridiculous, David said, folding his paper with sharp, aggressive movements. Rebecca, you know I think of you like family. I've watched you grow up. I'm proud of the young woman you've become. If Maya is putting ideas in your head about something sinister in that— Stop, Rebecca said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper but cutting through David's words like a blade. Please just stop. The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of neighborhood lawnmowers beginning their Saturday morning symphony. Maya could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 18 years of uncomfortable moments crystallizing into this single point in time. Rebecca, Linda said gently, moving closer to the breakfast bar, talk to us. Rebecca looked up and Maya saw tears gathering in her friend's eyes. It's not just today. It's been for a while now. The way he looks at me, the comments about my body, about what I'm wearing. Last month, when I was here studying, he came into Maya's room and told me I looked distracting, and maybe I should put on a sweater. But it was 80 degrees outside. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't known about that incident. How many others had there been that she hadn't witnessed? And when I was 17, Rebecca continued, her voice trembling but determined, he told me I reminded him of how Linda looked when she was young, but that I was developing even better. He said it like it was a compliment, but it made my skin crawl. Linda's face went ashen. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles matching Rebecca's in their whiteness. Rebecca, honey, David said, his tone shifting to something Maya recognized as his reasonable adult voice, the one he used when he was trying to manage a situation. I think you're misinterpreting— No, Maya interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Don't you dare tell her she's misinterpreting. Don't you dare tell either of us that we're imagining things or being too sensitive. We know what we heard. We know how it made us feel. She thought about her friend Sarah, who had stopped coming over junior year without explanation, about Emma, who always found excuses to leave when David came home, about the way her own friends had gradually stopped staying for dinner, stopped sleeping over, stopped treating her house like the second home it had always been. I've been thinking about this for months. I've been trying to figure out why my friends don't want to come over anymore, why they get weird when you're around. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, but I wasn't, was I? David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor with a harsh screech. He was a tall man, imposing when he wanted to be, and Maya instinctively took a step back. It was a movement she'd made countless times without thinking, a reflexive response to his presence that she was only now recognizing as something other than respect. This is insane, he said, his voice rising. I'm being attacked in my own home for caring about these girls, for being a father figure to Rebecca when her own father walked out, for being proud of Maya and wanting her to know she's beautiful. When did being a loving parent become predatory?
When you started commenting on teenage girls' bodies, Maya shot back, and she saw him recoil as if she'd slapped him. When you started making us uncomfortable in our own skin. When you started looking at us like we were women instead of kids. You are women, David exploded. You're 18 years old. You're adults. We were 16 when this started, maybe younger. And you're 53, Dad. You're a grown man commenting on children's bodies. How do you not see how wrong that is? The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could hear her mother's shallow breathing, Rebecca's quiet sniffles, the tick of the clock on the wall that had marked time through so many family moments. But this moment felt different from all the others. This moment felt like a line being crossed that could never be uncrossed. Linda was the first to speak, her voice carefully controlled. David, I think you need to apologize. Apologize for what? David's face was flushed now, his composure cracking. For caring? For being involved in my daughter's life? For treating Rebecca like family? For making us feel unsafe, Rebecca said suddenly, her voice stronger than Maya had heard it all morning. For making us feel like objects instead of people. For making comments about our bodies that no adult should make about teenagers.
Maya saw something flicker across her father's face then, something that might have been recognition or shame or anger. It was gone too quickly for her to identify, replaced by the stubborn set of his jaw that she knew meant he was digging in his heels. "I have never, ever done anything inappropriate," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I have never touched either of you inappropriately. I have never said anything that was intended to make you uncomfortable. If you can't tell the difference between a compliment and something sinister, that says more about where your minds are than where mine is." Mina felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This was the trap she'd feared, the reason she'd kept quiet for so long. The way he could twist things, make her doubt herself, make her feel like she was the problem. "Intent doesn't matter if the impact is harmful," she said, words she'd learned in a psychology class but had never thought she'd use in her own kitchen. "You can say you didn't mean to make us uncomfortable, but we're telling you that you did. What matters now is what you do about it." "What do I do about it?" David laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no humor in it. "What exactly do you want me to do, Maya? Apologize for being proud of you? Promise to pretend I don't notice when you and your friends have grown up? Walk on eggshells in my own house because you've decided to see something ugly in everything I say?" Maya felt the tears prick at her eyes, frustration and hurt and anger all swirling together in her chest. This wasn't how she'd imagined this conversation going. She thought if she could just make him understand, if she could just explain how his words affected them, he would see, he would apologize, he would change. She hadn't prepared for him to make her feel like the villain. "Maya," her mother said softly, "maybe we should all take a step back. Think about this." "No," Maya said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm tired of thinking about it. I'm tired of making excuses for him. I'm tired of feeling like I have to protect my friends from my own father." The words hung in the air like an accusation, and Maya saw her parents exchange a look that was full of 23 years of marriage, of shared secrets and unspoken agreements, and the kind of communication that happens without words. "Protect them from what, exactly?" David asked, his voice deadly quiet. Maya felt Rebecca's hand slip into hers, warm and slightly trembling but steady, her best friend since third grade, who had trusted her enough to stay for breakfast, to speak up, to tell the truth even when it was terrifying. From feeling like pieces of meat, from being reduced to body parts, from having to worry about what we wear or how we sit or whether we're being too friendly because an adult might misinterpret it, from feeling like we can't just be kids in a place where we should feel safe.
Maya squeezed Rebecca's hand, grateful beyond words for her friend's courage. Together they stood in the kitchen that had been the heart of Maya's childhood, facing down a problem that had been growing like a cancer for years, finally bringing it into the light. But as Maya looked at her father's face, saw the anger and defensiveness and complete lack of understanding in his eyes, she realized with a sinking heart that bringing the problem into the light was only the first step. The real question was what happened next, and whether the people who were supposed to protect her would choose her over their own comfort. The clock on the wall ticked steadily onward, marking time in a house where everything had changed and nothing would ever be the same. Maya's bedroom had always been her sanctuary, but as she closed the door behind herself and Rebecca that afternoon, it felt more like a bunker. The pale yellow walls that her mother had helped her choose when she turned 13 seemed to mock her now with their cheerful optimism. This was supposed to be the room where she figured out who she was becoming, where she dreamed about her future, where she felt safe to be exactly herself. Instead, it had become the room where she parsed every interaction with her father, where she replayed uncomfortable moments, where she wondered if she was losing her mind. "God, Maya, I can't believe we actually said something," Rebecca said, sinking onto the window seat that overlooked the backyard where they'd built countless fairy houses and buried multiple hamsters and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. "My heart is still racing."
Maya sat on her bed, pulling her knees up to her chest in a pose that made her feel simultaneously like a little girl and like someone far too old for her years. "I keep thinking about all the times I wanted to say something and didn't," she admitted. "Like when he told Ashley she was getting dangerous curves at my 16th birthday party. She left right after that, remember? She said she didn't feel well, but she never came to another party," Rebecca finished. "I remember. I thought it was weird at the time, but I didn't connect it." Maya's room was a time capsule of their friendship. Photos from elementary school field trips covered her bulletin board, showing two gap-toothed girls with their arms around each other, grinning at the camera with the unself-conscious joy of childhood. There were pictures from middle school dances where they'd worn too much lip gloss and spent hours perfecting their hair. High school memories captured in Polaroids scattered across her desk. Prom shopping, senior night for soccer, the day they got their acceptance letters to college. In every photo, they looked so normal, so happy, so unaware of what was coming. "When did it start, do you think?" Maya asked, tracing the pattern on her comforter with one finger. It was the same bedding she'd had since she was 15, covered in tiny stars that at once seemed whimsical, but now felt childish. This was supposed to be the room where she figured out who she was becoming, where she dreamed about her future, where she felt safe to be exactly herself. Instead, it had become the room where she parsed every interaction with her father, where she replayed uncomfortable moments, where she wondered if she was losing her mind. "God, Maya, I can't believe we actually said something," Rebecca said, sinking onto the window seat that overlooked the backyard where they'd built countless fairy houses and buried multiple hamsters and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. "My heart is still racing." Maya sat on her bed, pulling her knees up to her chest in a pose that made her feel simultaneously like a little girl and like someone far too old for her years. "I keep thinking about all the times I wanted to say something and didn't," she admitted. "Like when he told Ashley she was getting dangerous curves at my 16th birthday party. She left right after that, remember? She said she didn't feel well, but she never came to another party," Rebecca finished. "I remember. I thought it was weird at the time, but I didn't connect it." Remembered the way Rebecca had gone quiet afterward, how she'd suddenly wanted to finish the baking quickly and go upstairs? "I'm so sorry," Maya whispered. "I should have noticed. I should have said something then." "You were 15, Rebecca said fiercely. "You shouldn't have had to notice. That should have been a safe space for both of us." Maya's phone buzzed on her nightstand, and she saw a text from her mother. "Can we talk when Rebecca goes home? Dad wants to have a family discussion." The idea of a family discussion made Maya's skin crawl. She could picture it now, her parents sitting her down like they had when she'd gotten in trouble as a kid, her father explaining why she was wrong, her mother playing mediator, everyone working to restore the peace and pretend nothing had happened. "My mom wants to talk later," Maya said, showing Rebecca the text. "A family discussion." Rebecca made a face. "That sounds awful." "Yeah, it does." Maya set her phone aside without responding to the text. "Becca, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why didn't you ever say anything before? I mean, I know why I didn't, but why didn't you?" Rebecca was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and tired. "Because I was afraid no one would believe me. Your dad is so respected. He's successful, he volunteers at church, he coaches Little League. Everyone thinks he's this great guy. And I'm just some kid whose own father walked out. Who was I to accuse Uncle Dave of being inappropriate?" Maya's heart broke a little. Rebecca had been calling David Uncle Dave since they were 8, back when he really had been like a second father to her, back when his attention had felt protective and kind instead of predatory and uncomfortable. "Plus," Rebecca continued, "I was afraid of losing you. This house, your family,
It was like my second home. My mom works 2 jobs. She's never home. This place was where I felt like I belonged. If I said something and nobody believed me, I would have lost all of that. And you. You never would have lost me, Maya said fiercely. But I might have lost your parents, and I wasn't ready for that, even if staying meant feeling uncomfortable sometimes. Maya understood that logic in a way that made her chest ache. She'd made the calculation countless times. Was the discomfort worth rocking the boat? Was she overreacting? Was it better to just endure and keep the peace? I keep thinking about other girls. Like, how many of my friends has he made uncomfortable? How many just stopped coming around without explaining why? They made a list, going through Maya's yearbook and talking about friends who had gradually faded from their social circle. The pattern was disturbing once they started looking for it. Girls who had been regular fixtures in Maya's life until sometime in high school, when they'd started making excuses, finding reasons not to come over, suggesting they hang out at their houses instead. Emma definitely, Rebecca said, pointing to a photo from junior year. She used to sleep over all the time, and then suddenly she never wanted to stay for dinner anymore. And Sarah, remember how she used to love swimming in our pool, and then she just stopped? She said the chlorine was bothering her skin, but she still swam at other people's houses. What about Jessica? She was here all the time freshman year, and then Dad started calling her Curvy Jessie like it was a cute nickname. Maya finished, the memory hitting her like a punch to the stomach. Oh my God, I'd forgotten about that. She hated it. She asked him to stop, and he said she should take it as a compliment.
They sat in silence for a while, both processing the magnitude of what they were uncovering. Maya's childhood felt like it was being rewritten in real time. Innocent memories taking on sinister undertones, moments of discomfort revealing themselves as red flags she'd been too young or too conditioned to recognize. "Maya," Rebecca said quietly, "do you think he ever... with other girls?" "I don't know," Maya said, but the uncertainty in her voice scared her. "I hope not, but if he was making comments to us, to all these girls..." The question hung between them, too terrible to fully voice, but too important to ignore. Maya thought about her father's position of authority, the little league team he coached, the youth group activities at church, the way parents trusted him with their children because he seemed so safe, so normal, so respectable. "We have to tell someone," Maya said suddenly. "I mean, not just our parents, someone who can actually do something." "Like who?" "I don't know. A counselor? The police? Someone who works with this kind of thing?" Rebecca looked terrified. "Maya, what if we're wrong? What if we're making this bigger than it is? What if he really was just trying to be nice and we're destroying his life over nothing?" It was the fear that had kept them silent for so long, the voice that whispered they were overreacting, being dramatic, causing trouble where none existed. Maya had heard that voice so clearly over the years, especially when her father dismissed her concerns with phrases like, "You're too sensitive," or "You're reading too much into things." But sitting in her bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of friendships that had withered under her father's inappropriate attention, Maya realized that the voice wasn't protecting her. It was protecting him. "Becca," she said, "if this was happening to a stranger, if some other girl told us her dad's friend was making comments about her body, what would we tell her?" "We'd tell her she wasn't overreacting," Rebecca said immediately. "We'd tell her that adults shouldn't talk to kids that way ever." "Right. So why are we holding ourselves to a different standard?" Rebecca nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Because we've been trained to protect him instead of ourselves." Maya's phone buzzed again, another text from her mother. "Maya, please come downstairs. We need to talk about this as a family." This time, Maya texted back, "Not tonight. I need time to think." The response came immediately. "This isn't optional, honey. Come down now." Maya showed the text to Rebecca, who read it with a grimace. "Do you want me to stay?" Rebecca asked.
No, Maya said, though every part of her wanted to say yes. You should go home. But, Becca, will you think about what we talked about? About telling someone? Yeah, Rebecca said, gathering her things. I will. And Maya, thank you for finally saying something, for believing me, for not letting him make us feel crazy. After Rebecca left, Maya sat alone in her room listening to the sounds of her house. Her parents' voices drifting up from the kitchen, low and intense. The television in the living room, tuned to some weekend news program. The familiar creaks and settling sounds of the home she'd grown up in. It all sounded the same as it always had. But everything felt different. Maya pulled out her laptop and opened a private browsing window. She'd never researched this kind of thing before, had never needed the vocabulary to describe what she was experiencing. But now she typed carefully, "Inappropriate comments from adult family member."
The search results were overwhelming and validating in equal measure. Articles about grooming behaviors, support forums for survivors of inappropriate conduct, resources for teenagers dealing with boundary violations from trusted adults. Maya read story after story that sounded uncomfortably familiar. The gradual escalation of comments, the way authority figures normalized inappropriate behavior, the confusion and self-doubt that victims experienced. One article talked about something called covert sexual abuse, inappropriate behavior that didn't involve physical contact, but still caused psychological harm. The description made Maya's stomach turn with recognition. Covert sexual abuse includes making sexual comments about a child's body or development, creating an atmosphere of sexual tension in the home, making the child feel responsible for the adult's emotional needs, and using shame and guilt to silence the child when they express discomfort. Maya read the article twice, highlighting passages that resonated with her experience. The part about creating sexual tension in the home hit particularly hard. She thought about how she'd started dressing more conservatively around her father without consciously deciding to do so, how she'd begun timing her showers to avoid running into him in the hallway, how she'd stopped bringing friends over as much without really understanding why. Her body had been trying to protect her even when her mind was still making excuses. Another knock on her door interrupted her research. "Maya?" Her mother's voice. "Can I come in?" Maya closed her laptop quickly, her heart racing. "Just a minute." She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself before opening the door to find her mother standing in the hallway with a pained expression. "Honey, we really need to talk," Linda said. "As a family. Your father is very upset, and I think there are some misunderstandings we need to clear up." Maya looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw exhaustion in the lines around her eyes, stress in the set of her shoulders. Linda Chen had always been the family peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromises and made everyone feel better. But some things couldn't be smoothed over. "Mom," Maya said carefully, "what if they aren't misunderstandings? What if Dad really has been inappropriate?" Linda's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment Maya saw past the composed exterior to something raw and scared underneath. "Maya, sweetheart, your father loves you more than anything in the world. He would never, ever hurt you or your friends. Sometimes adults say things that come out wrong, especially when they're trying to navigate their children growing up. It's confusing for parents, too." Maya felt the familiar pull to comfort her mother, to back down and restore harmony. It would be so easy to agree, to say maybe she had misunderstood, to let things go back to the way they were. But then she thought about Rebecca's face when she talked about feeling unsafe. She thought about all the friends who had gradually disappeared from her life. She thought about the girl she'd been at 15, dismissed and gaslit whenever she expressed discomfort. "Mom," Maya said quietly, "I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Dad has made inappropriate comments about my friends' bodies. He's made them feel uncomfortable and sexualized. That's not a misunderstanding. That's harmful behavior." Linda was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. "Have you talked to your friends about this? Are they all saying the same thing?" "Mom, I shouldn't have to take a poll to validate my own experience," Maya said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "But yes, it's not just Rebecca. Other girls have felt uncomfortable too."
Linda nodded slowly, and Maya saw something shift in her mother's expression. Not acceptance exactly, but a crack in the wall of denial. "Come downstairs," Linda said eventually. "Let's all talk about this together. Your father wants to explain himself." Maya almost laughed at the irony. Of course he wanted to explain himself. Of course he wanted to control the narrative, to make her understand why she was wrong to feel violated in her own home.
Okay, Maya said, because she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. But Mom, I need you to really listen to what I'm saying. Not just to Dad's explanations, but to me. Linda nodded, though Maya could see the conflict in her eyes. 23 years of marriage, of presenting a united front, of protecting the family image, it wouldn't be easy to break those patterns. As Maya followed her mother downstairs, she felt like she was walking into a courtroom where she would have to defend her own reality. But for the first time in years, she felt ready for the fight. The kitchen table where she'd done homework and eaten countless meals now felt like a battlefield. Her father sat in his usual chair, his expression carefully controlled, his hands folded in front of him like he was preparing for a business meeting. "Maya," he said as she sat down across from him, "I think we got off on the wrong foot this morning." Here we go, Maya thought. The reasonable tone, the measured words, the careful repositioning of himself as the rational adult dealing with an irrational teenager. But Maya wasn't the same girl who had walked into this kitchen that morning. Research and validation and the simple act of speaking her truth out loud had changed something fundamental inside her. She was done being reasonable about unreasonable behavior. The family meeting stretched into the evening like a marathon that no one wanted to run. Maya sat across from her father at the kitchen table that had once felt like the heart of their home, but now felt like a courtroom. Every familiar detail transformed into evidence in a trial she'd never wanted to participate in. "Let me be very clear," David said, his hands folded carefully on the table, his voice taking on the measured tone he used in business meetings. "I have never, ever behaved inappropriately toward you or any of your friends. What we have here is a misunderstanding that has gotten completely out of hand." Maya watched her father's face as he spoke, noticing details she'd never paid attention to before. The way his jaw tightened when he was trying to control his temper, the slight tremor in his hands that suggested he wasn't as calm as he appeared, the carefully blank expression that reminded her of a mask. "David," Linda said carefully, "maybe you could apologize for making the girls feel uncomfortable, even if that wasn't your intention?" "Apologize for what?" David's voice sharpened despite his obvious efforts to stay reasonable. "For caring? For being involved in Maya's life? For treating her friends like family?" Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. He genuinely couldn't see it. Or wouldn't see it. The distinction seemed less important now than the result. He was never going to acknowledge that his behavior had been wrong. "Dad," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I need to tell you about some other incidents. Not just what happened this morning with Rebecca." "That's because you made her uncomfortable," Maya said, reading from her notes. "Junior year, she was helping me with a history project. You came into my room and told her she was distracting and should consider wearing something less revealing to focus better. She was wearing a normal t-shirt, Dad, but she never stayed for dinner again after that." Maya saw her mother's face go pale, and she pressed on. "Sarah Martinez, Rebecca's cousin. Remember when you started calling her Dangerous Sarah because of her curves? You thought it was funny. She didn't. She stopped coming to our pool parties." "Those were compliments," David insisted, but his voice was getting tighter. "I was trying to build these girls' confidence." "By commenting on their bodies?" Maya shot back. "By reducing them to their physical attributes? Dad, these are children. They shouldn't have to worry about whether their bodies are distracting to adults." She looked down at her phone again, at the list but had grown longer as she'd remembered more incidents. "Jessica Wayne. You called her Curvy Jessie until she asked you to stop. Then you told her she should take it as a compliment because most girls would kill for her figure." "Maya," David started, but she cut him off. "Ashley Rodriguez, my 16th birthday party. You told her she was getting dangerous curves and needed to be careful not to cause accidents. She left the party right after that and never came to another one." Maya's voice was growing stronger with each name, Each incident, each piece of evidence that she wasn't crazy or oversensitive or making things up. Stephanie Liu, you told her she was filling out nicely and asked if she was trying to drive the boys wild in a perfectly normal sundress. The kitchen was silent except for the tick of the clock on the wall and the distant sound of neighbors starting their evening routines. Maya realized she was shaking, not with fear now, but with anger that had been building for years. And me, Dad, your own daughter. Do you remember telling me I was getting dangerous like my mother when I started developing? Do you remember commenting on how I filled out my jeans in front of my friends? Do you remember making me feel like my own body was something I had to hide in my own house? David's carefully constructed composure was beginning to crack. Maya, you're taking normal parental observations and twisting them into something sinister. I was proud of you growing into a beautiful young woman. I was trying to help you understand that you were becoming attractive and needed to be aware of that. By making me feel like a piece of meat? Maya's voice rose, despite her efforts to stay calm. By making my friends uncomfortable? By creating an atmosphere where teenage girls had to worry about what a grown man thought about their bodies? I never made anyone feel like a piece of meat, David snapped, his mask finally slipping. I was being supportive. I was being encouraging. If these girls chose to interpret normal adult conversation as something inappropriate, that's their problem, not mine. The words hung in the air like poison gas, and Maya saw her mother flinch as if she had been physically struck. Their problem? Maya repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Dad, they were children. Rebecca was 15 when you started making comments about her body. I was 14 when you told me I was getting dangerous. How is it a child's responsibility to correctly interpret an adult's inappropriate comments? They weren't inappropriate, David's voice exploded across the kitchen, making both Maya and Linda jump. Jesus Christ, Maya, when did you become so determined to see the worst in everything? When did you decide that your father, who has loved and protected you your entire life, was some kind of predator? The word predator hit the room like a bomb. None of them had used it before, but there it was, the elephant that had been lurking in the corner of every conversation. I never called you a predator, Maya said carefully. But that's what you're implying, isn't it? David's face was flushed now, his careful composure completely gone. That's what this whole conversation is about. You're accusing me of being inappropriate with children. Do you have any idea what that could do to my reputation, my career, my life? Maya felt something click into place, a puzzle piece she hadn't even known was missing. This wasn't about her discomfort or her friend's safety. This was about his reputation, his image, his life, not theirs. David, Linda said softly, I think you need to calm down. Calm down? David turned to his wife, and Maya saw something in his expression that made her stomach turn. Linda, our daughter is accusing me of being some kind of pervert. She's trying to destroy everything we've built because she can't handle the fact that she's grown up. I'm not trying to destroy anything, Maya said, but her voice sounded small and far away, even to her own ears. I'm trying to understand why you made me and my friends feel unsafe in our own home. Unsafe? Maya laughed, but it was a harsh, ugly sound. Maya, you have never been unsafe in his house. You have been loved and protected and provided for every single day of your life. If you want to see what unsafe looks like, go talk to kids whose fathers actually abandoned them or hurt them or ignored them completely. Maya thought about Rebecca, whose father had walked out when she was 10, leaving her mother to work 2 jobs and her daughter to find father figures wherever she could, including in Maya's house, with Maya's dad, who had seemed so safe and loving until he wasn't. Just because you didn't abandon us doesn't mean your behavior was appropriate, Maya said. Just because you provided for us doesn't mean you get to make comments about teenage girls' bodies without consequences. Consequences? David's voice went very quiet, which Maya knew from experience was more dangerous than when he yelled. What consequences are you talking about, Maya? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that Maya wasn't entirely ready to face. What consequences was she talking about? What did she want to happen? What was the end goal of this conversation?
I want you to acknowledge that your behavior was wrong, Maya said finally. I want you to apologize to Rebecca and to me and to any other girls you've made uncomfortable. I want you to understand that commenting on children's bodies is never appropriate, no matter what your intentions are. And if I don't? David asked. What then? Maya felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss she couldn't see the bottom of. What then, indeed? What power did she actually have in this situation? She was 18, financially dependent on her parents, about to start college on their dime. David was a respected member of the community, a successful businessman, a pillar of their church. Who would believe her if this became a public battle? David, Linda said softly, I think we should consider family therapy. Someone who can help us work through this communication breakdown. Communication breakdown, David turned to his wife, and Linda Thurnott stared at his wife. And Linda, our daughter is accusing me of being some kind of pervert. She's trying to destroy everything we've built because she can't handle the fact that she's grown up. I'm not trying to destroy anything, Linda said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. The solution is for Maya to stop this nonsense, to apologize for these ridiculous accusations, and move on with her life. Maya felt the familiar pull to give in, to smooth things over, to restore peace to the family. It would be so easy to say she'd overreacted, that she'd misunderstood, that she was sorry for causing problems. Her father was looking at her expectantly, waiting for her to back down the way she always had before. But then she thought about Rebecca, trembling in their kitchen that morning as she found the courage to speak her truth. She thought about Emma and Sarah and Jessica and Ashley and all the other girls who had quietly removed themselves from her father's orbit because they trusted their instincts even when no one else would. She thought about the 14-year-old version of herself, confused and uncomfortable but lacking the vocabulary to explain why her father's attention felt wrong. No, Maya said quietly. No what? David demanded. No, I won't apologize. No, I won't pretend this didn't happen. No, I won't enable your behavior by staying quiet about it anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could hear her own heartbeat, could hear her mother's shallow breathing, could hear the refrigerator humming and the neighbor's dog barking and the sound of her childhood ending. Fine, David said finally, standing up from the table with such force that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. If that's how you want to play this, Maya, then we'll play it your way. But understand something. I have been nothing but a loving father to you. And if you want to destroy that because of your own twisted interpretation of normal parental affection, that's your choice. He paused at the kitchen doorway, turning back to look at her with an expression that was equal parts hurt and fury. But don't expect me to participate in my own character assassination. I know who I am, and I know what I've done and haven't done. If you want to live in a fantasy where your father is the villain, that's your prerogative, but I won't be a part of it. With that, he walked out, leaving Maya and Linda sitting at the kitchen table in stunned silence. Maya's phone buzzed on the table between them. A text from Rebecca. How did it go? Maya stared at the message, unsure how to even begin to answer. How did you summarize the implosion of everything you thought you knew about your family? How did you explain that standing up for yourself felt simultaneously like the most important and most terrifying thing you'd ever done? Maya, Linda said softly, what happens now? It was the same question Maya had been asking herself, and she still didn't have an answer. She looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw a woman caught between her daughter and her husband, between the truth she was beginning to see and the life she'd built around denying it. I don't know, Mom, Maya said honestly, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't go back to feeling uncomfortable in my own house and pretending that's normal. Linda nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. I need to think about all of this. This is a lot to process. I understood. 23 years of marriage, of shared history, of believing you knew someone completely. It couldn't be easy to suddenly question all of that. Mom, Maya said gently, I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. This isn't about destroying our family. It's about making it safe. Linda reached across the table and took Maya's hand, her touch warm and familiar and heartbreaking in its gentleness. I know, sweetheart. I know you're not trying to hurt anyone. I need time to figure out what I think about all of this. Maya squeezed her mother's hand, grateful for even this small acknowledgement. It wasn't the full support she'd hoped for, but it wasn't the complete dismissal she'd feared either. Take all the time you need, Maya said. But, Mom, while you're thinking, maybe pay attention to how Dad talks to young women. Really pay attention, because once you start noticing, you can't stop. Not ready for that yet.
Maya's phone buzzed again. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? This time, Maya texted back. I'm okay. It was awful, but I'm glad I said something. Thank you for giving me the courage. Rebecca, thank you for believing me. That means everything. Maya looked around the kitchen that had been the site of so many family moments, birthday cakes and homework sessions and late-night talks over hot chocolate. It looked exactly the same as it always had, but she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. She'd crossed a line tonight, spoken truths that couldn't be unspoken, challenged a dynamic that had been years in the making. She'd chosen her own reality over her father's version of events, even when it meant risking everything she'd known about her family. As she headed upstairs to her room, Maya realized that she felt something she hadn't experienced in years when it came to her father. She felt free. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was living in her own truth instead of someone else's version of it. The next few days passed in a strange, tense quiet. David left for work early and came home late, avoiding family dinners and spending most of his time in his home office with the door closed. Linda moved through the house like a ghost, present but not really there, clearly wrestling with thoughts and feelings she wasn't ready to share. Maya found herself caught between relief and anxiety. The immediate confrontation was over, but the aftermath felt like walking through a minefield. Every interaction with her parents was carefully calibrated, polite but distant, as if they were all strangers sharing a house. It was Rebecca who finally forced the next conversation. She showed up at Maya's house on Wednesday afternoon, her face grim with determination. I've been doing research, she announced as soon as Maya opened the front door, about inappropriate behavior from trusted adults, about what we're supposed to do when it happens. Maya led her friend upstairs, grateful for her mother's absence and her father's closed office door. What did you find? Maya asked, once they were safely in her room. Rebecca pulled out her phone, scrolling through bookmarked articles and websites. There are reporting requirements for adults who work with children. Teachers, coaches, youth group leaders, they're supposed to report inappropriate behavior. Maya's stomach dropped. Dad coaches Little League. I know, Rebecca said quietly. Maya, I think we need to tell someone official, not just our parents, someone who can actually do something. Maya felt the familiar panic rise in her chest. But what if we're wrong? What if we're making this bigger than it is? Rebecca looked at her steadily. Maya, we've gone over this. We're not wrong. And even if we were, even if somehow we were completely misinterpreting everything, don't you think the people whose job it is to protect kids should make that determination? Maya knew Rebecca was right, but the thought of making this official, of involving authorities, of potentially destroying her father's reputation and career felt overwhelming. What would we even say? He never touched us. He never did anything that would show up on a police report.
We'd tell them the truth,
Rebecca said firmly. About the comments, about the pattern of behavior, about how he made multiple teenage girls feel uncomfortable and unsafe. There are people trained to deal with exactly this kind of situation. Maya's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. "Mom?" Maya answered. "Maya, can you come downstairs? Your father and I need to talk to you." Maya's heart sank. "Both of you?" "Yes, honey, both of us." Maya looked at Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll wait here," Rebecca said. "But Maya, whatever they say, remember what we've talked about. You're not crazy, you're not oversensitive, and you're not wrong." Maya made her way downstairs on shaking legs, steeling herself for whatever came next. She found her parents sitting together on the living room couch, a united front that immediately put her on edge. "Sit down, sweetheart," Linda said, gesturing to the chair across from them. Maya perched on the edge of the chair, every muscle in her body tense. "Maya," David began, his voice carefully controlled, "your mother and I have been talking about our conversation the other night. We think it would be best for everyone if we put this behind us and moved forward as a family." "What does that mean?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. "It means," Linda said gently, "that we understand you felt uncomfortable and your father is sorry about that. But we also think that some of this might be, well, a misunderstanding that got out of hand." Maya's heart sank. They'd discussed it, debated it, and decided that she was wrong, that her reality was less valid than their comfort. "A misunderstanding," Maya repeated flatly. "Maya," David said, leaning forward slightly, "I love you more than anything in the world. You are my daughter, my pride and joy, the most important thing in my life. If I ever said anything that made you uncomfortable, that was never my intention. I was trying to be supportive, to help you and your friends feel confident and beautiful." It was a masterful non-apology, Maya realized. It acknowledged her discomfort while completely absolving him of responsibility for causing it. It positioned his intentions as pure while implying that any negative impact was due to her misinterpretation. What about Rebecca? What about all the other girls who felt uncomfortable? "Teenagers often misinterpret adult behavior," Linda said carefully, "especially when they're going through the confusing process of growing up. It's natural to feel sensitive about your changing body and to sometimes read more into comments than what was intended." Maya felt like she was drowning in reasonableness, in the kind of logic that sounded compassionate but was actually gaslighting disguised as empathy. "So you're saying we all misunderstood? All of us? Multiple teenage girls all had the same misunderstanding about the same behavior pattern?" "Maya," David said, his voice taking on a slight edge, "I think you need to ask yourself why you are so determined to believe the worst about your father. I think you need to consider that maybe, just maybe, you're wrong about this." Maya looked at her parents, her father with his carefully controlled expression and her mother with her pained but determined face, and realized that this was as far as they were willing to go. This was their final offer. Accept their version of reality, apologize for the misunderstanding, and pretend none of this ever happened. "No," Maya said, quietly. "No what?" David asked. "No, I won't apologize. No, I won't pretend this was a misunderstanding. No, I won't accept that multiple teenage girls were all wrong about feeling uncomfortable around you." Maya stood up, her legs steadier than she'd expected them to be. "I know what happened," she continued. "I know how your comments made me feel. I know how they made my friends feel. And I know that you making us responsible for your impact, regardless of your intent, is wrong." She looked at her mother, hoping for some sign of support, some crack in the united front, but Linda's face remained carefully neutral, loyal to her husband even in the face of her daughter's pain. "Maya," Linda said softly, "please don't do anything you'll regret. Think about what this could do to our family." "I am thinking about our family," Maya replied. "I'm thinking about making it safe for everyone."
She turned and walked back upstairs, leaving her parents on the couch with their reasonable explanations and their united front and their absolute refusal to acknowledge that their daughter might know her own experience better than they did. Rebecca was waiting in Maya's room, and one look at Maya's face told her everything she needed to know. "They want me to apologize," Maya said, sinking onto her bed. "They want me to say it was all a misunderstanding and move on." "But you're not going to," Rebecca said. "It wasn't a question." "No," Maya said, and hearing herself say it out loud made something solidify in her chest. "I'm not going to." Rebecca nodded and pulled out her phone. "Then we call the school counselor tomorrow, and we look up the number for the youth services hotline, and we figure out who else needs to know about this." Maya felt scared and sad and angry all at once, but underneath all of those emotions was something else: determination. She was done protecting people who wouldn't protect her. She was done making herself smaller to keep other people comfortable. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." As the evening wore on, Maya heard her parents' voices drifting up from downstairs, low and intense. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clearly tense. At one point, she heard her mother's voice rise sharply, then fall back to an urgent whisper. Whatever they were discussing, it wasn't going smoothly. Around 10 o'clock, Maya heard footsteps on the stairs, then a soft knock on her door. "Maya?" her mother's voice. "Can I come in?" Maya opened the door to find Linda standing in the hallway, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, what's wrong?" Linda stepped into the room and closed the door behind her, then sat heavily on Maya's desk chair. "Maya," Linda said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Maya's heart started racing. "Okay. Has he ever touched you inappropriately, or tried to?" The question hung in the air like a live wire, dangerous and electric. "No," Maya said immediately. "No, Mom, nothing like that. It was just the comments, the way he looked at us, the way he talked about our bodies." Linda nodded, relief and something else, disappointment, flickering across her face.
Mom, Maya said carefully, "why are you asking?" Linda was quiet for a long time, staring down at her hands. "Because," she said finally, "if it was just inappropriate comments, I can live with that. I can work with that. We can get counseling. We can set boundaries. We can fix it." She looked up at Maya, and her eyes were full of a pain that Maya didn't fully understand. "But if it was more than that," Linda continued, "if there was physical contact, or if he was crossing those kinds of lines with children, I would have to leave him, and I'm not ready for that." Maya felt her heart break a little for her mother, caught between her daughter and her husband, between the truth and the life she'd built. "Mom," Maya said gently, "even without physical contact, what he did was wrong. Comments about teenage girls' bodies are wrong. Making children feel sexualized and uncomfortable is wrong." "I know," Linda whispered. "I know it's wrong. But Maya, I've been married to your father for 23 years. I've built my whole life around him, around us, around this family. I can't just throw that all away." "You wouldn't be throwing it away," Maya said. "You'd be protecting your daughter." Linda started crying then. Quiet tears that spoke of 23 years of compromises and small betrayals and choosing the path of least resistance. "I'm trying to protect everyone," Linda said. "I'm trying to find a way to keep our family together while also making sure you feel safe. But I don't know how to do both." Maya sat on her bed, looking at her mother's bent head, and realized with painful clarity that Linda was going to choose her husband. Maybe not immediately, maybe not without a fight, But ultimately, she was going to choose the man she'd spent half her life with over the daughter who was asking her to confront an uncomfortable truth. "Mom," Maya said gently, "I love you, but I can't protect Dad's feelings anymore. I can't pretend this didn't happen to make things easier for the family." Linda nodded without looking up. I know you can't, and I know that puts me in an impossible position." They sat in silence for a while, mother and daughter, both trapped in a situation that had no good solutions. "What are you going to do?" Linda asked eventually. "I'm going to report it. To the school, to whoever handles this kind of thing. Because even if you can't protect me, I need to protect other girls." Linda looked up sharply. "Maya, think about what that could do to your father's reputation, his career, our financial situation, your college fund." Maya felt the familiar pressure to prioritize everyone else's needs over her own safety and well-being, the unspoken threat that standing up for herself would have consequences for everyone she loved. "I have thought about it, and I've decided that my safety and the safety of other girls is more important than Dad's reputation." Linda stood up slowly, looking older than Maya had ever seen her. "I can't stop you," she said, "but Maya, I need you to understand, if you do this, if you make this public, it's going to change everything. Forever." "I know," Maya said, "but Mom, everything changed the moment Dad decided to sexualize teenage girls. I'm just refusing to keep it a secret anymore." Linda nodded and walked toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. "Maya," she said without turning around, "I do love you. I hope you know that." "I know, Mom. I love you too." After Linda left, Maya sat alone in her room, processing the weight of the conversation. Her mother's tears, her father's defensiveness, the family's collective decision to prioritize his comfort over her reality. It all crystallized into a stark understanding of where she stood. She was on her own. But for the first time in years, that felt like a position of strength rather than vulnerability. Maya picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for the crisis hotline she'd bookmarked during her research. She stared at the number for a long time, thumb hovering over the call button.
Tomorrow, she would make the call. Tomorrow, she would speak to someone whose job it was to believe survivors and protect children. Tomorrow, she would stop being responsible for managing everyone else's feelings about her own trauma. Tonight, she would sit with the knowledge that she was brave enough to choose her own well-being over her family's comfort. It was terrifying and lonely and absolutely the right thing to do. Maya woke up Thursday morning with the sensation of standing at the edge of a precipice. Sunlight filtered through her bedroom curtains, casting familiar shadows across walls covered with the detritus of 18 years of life. Honor roll certificates, photos with friends, a participation ribbon from middle school track that she'd never had the heart to throw away. Everything looked exactly the same, but she felt fundamentally different, as if she'd shed an old skin overnight. The house was unusually quiet. Maya checked her phone, 7:30 a.m. Her father should have been having coffee in the kitchen, reading his morning news, preparing for another day of being the respected businessman and community leader that everyone believed him to be. Instead, she heard nothing. She dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater that made her feel armor-plated, then crept downstairs to find a note on the kitchen counter in her mother's handwriting. "Gone to work early. Dad's at the office. There's cereal in the pantry. We'll talk tonight. Love, Mom." Maya stared at the note, recognizing it for what it was, a strategic retreat. Her parents were avoiding her, buying themselves time to figure out how to handle a situation that was spiraling beyond their control. But Maya had her own plans. She called Rebecca while eating a bowl of cereal that tasted like cardboard. "I'm doing it today," Maya said as soon as Rebecca answered. "I'm calling the school counselor and I'm calling that youth services number we found." "Are you sure?" Rebecca's voice was careful, supportive, but realistic. "Because once you do this, Maya, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure," Maya said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Becca, will you..." Will you come with me when I talk to Miss Rodriguez? Of course, Rebecca said immediately. Do you want me to meet you at school? Maya looked around the kitchen where she had eaten thousands of meals, where she had done homework and celebrated birthdays and had countless normal family moments, where just days ago, her father had dismissed her concerns as oversensitivity and her mother had chosen his comfort over her safety. Yeah, Maya said. Meet me at school. The morning classes passed in a blur of Maya checking her phone, watching the clock, and trying to focus on calculus problems when her mind was entirely occupied with the conversation she was about to have. When lunch period arrived, she and Rebecca walked to the guidance office with the purposeful stride of soldiers heading into battle. Ms. Rodriguez was a small woman with kind eyes and an office filled with inspirational posters and stress balls. Maya had been in this office before. College planning sessions, schedule changes, the normal administrative interactions of high school. But this felt entirely different. Maya, Rebecca, Ms. Rodriguez said with a warm smile as they knocked on her open door. Come in, girls. What can I help you with today?
Maya and Rebecca exchanged a look, and Maya felt her carefully prepared speech dissolve on her tongue. How did you begin a conversation like this? How did you tell a trusted adult that your own father had been inappropriate with you and your friends? Ms. Rodriguez, Maya began, her voice smaller than she'd intended. I need to report something about an adult who's been inappropriate with teenage girls. Maya watched Ms. Rodriguez's expression shift from casual friendliness to focused attention. She'd clearly had conversations like this before. Okay, Ms. Rodriguez said, gesturing for them to sit in the chairs across from her desk. Can you tell me more about what's happened? Maya took a deep breath and began to talk. She told Ms. Rodriguez about the comments, about the pattern of behavior, about the way her friends had gradually stopped coming to her house. Rebecca added her own experiences, her voice getting stronger as she spoke about incidents Maya hadn't even known about. Ms. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad, her expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. Maya, Ms. Rodriguez said when they finished, this adult you're talking about, is it someone in a position of authority over children? A teacher, coach, youth leader? Maya's stomach clenched. He coaches Little League, she said quietly, and he volunteers with the youth group at our church. Ms. Rodriguez nodded grimly. I see. And have you talked to your parents about this? Maya's tears pricked at her eyes. I tried. They think I'm overreacting. They want me to apologize and pretend it never happened. And Rebecca, Ms. Rodriguez turned to Maya's friend. Have you told your mother about these incidents? Rebecca shook her head. My mom works 2 jobs. She's never home. And she really likes Maya's family. They've been so good to me over the years. I don't think she'd believe me. Ms. Rodriguez set down her pen and looked at both girls with an expression that was equal parts compassionate and determined. 5 years later, Maya Chen Martinez stood at the podium of the university auditorium looking out at an audience of social work students, community advocates, and survivors who had gathered for the annual conference on childhood trauma and healing. At 23, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to trust her own voice, who had discovered that speaking truth could be both terrifying and transformative. When I was 18, Maya began, her voice clear and steady. I did something that changed my life forever. I told the truth about inappropriate behavior from a trusted adult. Today, I want to talk to you about what happens after you speak up, both the challenges and the unexpected gifts that come from choosing courage over comfort. In the audience, Maya spotted familiar faces. Rebecca sat in the 3rd row, now a graduate student in psychology, her research focused on the long-term impacts of childhood boundary violations. Maya's mother, Linda, sat near the back, her presence a testament to 5 years of therapy, accountability, and the slow rebuilding of trust between mother and daughter. Maya had married Rebecca the previous spring in a small ceremony that celebrated not just their love, but their shared journey from trauma to healing. Rebecca had proposed with a ring engraved with the words, "Your voice matters,"
a reminder of the conversation that had started their path to freedom. The statistics tell us that 1 in 4 girls will experience some form of sexual abuse or boundary violation before they reach adulthood. But statistics don't capture the complexity of what happens when the perpetrator is someone you love, someone your community respects, someone whose harm is hidden behind a facade of care and protection.
I want to tell you about Sarah, Maya said, clicking to the next slide in her presentation. Sarah was 15 when she experienced inappropriate comments from a youth coach. She removed herself from the situation but never reported it because she was afraid no one would believe her. 7 years later, when she heard about my case, she finally found the courage to speak up. Today, Sarah is a children's advocate who has helped dozens of young people find their voices. The slide showed a photo of Sarah Martinez, now a professional advocate, speaking at a community training session about recognizing grooming behaviors. And this is Emma, Maya continued, advancing to the next slide. Emma experienced boundary violations from a family friend, but kept silent for years because the perpetrator was considered a pillar of the community. After my investigation became public, Emma connected with other survivors and realized she wasn't alone. She's now pursuing a law degree with a focus on children's rights. Emma Sullivan's photo showed her at law school graduation, surrounded by family members who had initially struggled to believe her story, but had eventually become some of her strongest supporters. The point I'm making, Maya said, is that speaking up isn't just about the immediate situation. It's about creating space for other voices, other stories, other people who have been carrying their truth in isolation. Maya advanced to a slide showing statistics from the youth organization where she now worked as a program director. In the 5 years since my case, we've seen a 400% increase in reports of inappropriate behavior from adults in positions of authority over children. Not because abuse has increased, but because young people finally have vocabulary, validation, and systems that take their reports seriously. She clicked to the next slide showing photos from training sessions she'd conducted across the region. We've trained over 2,000 adults who work with children on recognizing warning signs, maintaining appropriate boundaries, and creating environments where young people feel safe to speak up. Maya paused, looking out at the audience of future social workers and advocates. But I don't want to paint an overly optimistic picture. Speaking up about abuse, especially when it comes from someone in your family or community, is still incredibly difficult. It often comes with real costs: relationships, financial security, community standing. The fairy tale version would tell you that speaking truth always leads to immediate justice and family healing. The reality is more complicated. Maya's own family had never fully reconciled. Her father, David, had completed the required therapy and compliance programs, but had never acknowledged the full extent of his inappropriate behavior. He lived alone now, estranged from most of his family and former friends, working at a job that didn't involve any contact with children. He occasionally received letters from him, carefully worded apologies that focused more on his own pain than on the harm he had caused. She had chosen not to maintain a relationship with him, a decision that had been agonizing but necessary for her own healing. Some people in their extended family still believed David had been unfairly targeted, that Maya had overreacted to normal paternal affection. The schism had been permanent and painful. Recovery isn't linear, Maya said. There are still days when I question whether I did the right thing. There are still moments when I miss the family I thought I had before I understood what was really happening. Healing from betrayal by someone who was supposed to protect you is a lifelong process. Maya advanced to a slide showing her wedding photo with Rebecca, both of them laughing as they cut a cake decorated with tiny figures of 2 women holding hands. But there are also unexpected gifts, Maya continued. I learned that I could trust my own instincts. I discovered the power of chosen family, people who love you not in spite of your truth, but because of your courage in speaking it. I found purpose in using my experience to protect other children. Maya clicked to a photo of her mother, Linda, speaking at a support group for families affected by abuse disclosures. My mother and I had to completely rebuild our relationship.
It took years of therapy, honest conversations, and her willingness to confront some painful truths about her own prior inaction.
Own complicity in the situation. But today, she's one of my strongest advocates. She facilitates support groups for parents whose children have disclosed abuse, helping them navigate the choice between loyalty to their partner and protection of their child. Linda had become something of a local expert on the secondary trauma experienced by non-offending family members, speaking at conferences about the complex emotions and difficult decisions faced by parents and spouses when abuse is disclosed. The work we do now, Maya continued, grows directly out of the pain we experienced then. My mother's ability to help other families comes from her deep understanding of how easy it is to choose denial over difficult truth. My own work with survivors is informed by the years I spent doubting my own experiences and feeling like I was going crazy. Maya clicked to a slide showing the youth center where she now worked, a bright building with colorful murals painted by young artists who had found healing through creative expression. 3 years ago, we opened the Safe Voice Youth Center, Maya said. It's a place where young people can access counseling, legal advocacy, peer support, and educational resources. We serve about 300 young people each year, many of them dealing with family situations similar to what I experienced. The slide changed to show photos from various programs: art therapy sessions, support groups, educational workshops about healthy relationships and boundaries. One of our most successful programs is our peer advocate training, Maya continued. We train survivors to support other survivors, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can hear is, "Me too," from someone who truly understands your experience. Maya had personally trained 47 peer advocates over the past 3 years, young people who had transformed their own trauma into a tool for helping others heal. I want to share one more story with you, Maya said, advancing to a slide showing a photo of a young woman standing at a podium, holding a microphone with a confident smile. This is Maria Santos. She was 16 when she reported inappropriate behavior from a teacher. Her family initially didn't believe her. Her school tried to handle it quietly, and she felt completely alone. Maria found our youth center through a friend, participated in our support groups, and eventually became a peer advocate herself. Maya clicked to the next slide, showing Maria leading a workshop with a group of teenagers. Today, Maria is studying to become a social worker. She's created an app that helps young people identify warning signs of grooming behavior and connects them with resources. Last month, her app was downloaded by someone who used it to report their own abuse situation, leading to an investigation that protected multiple children. Maya paused, letting the impact of that story settle over the audience. That's the ripple effect we're talking about. One person's courage to speak up creates space for another person's healing, which creates protection for other children, which builds stronger communities where young people are truly safe. Maya clicked to her final slide, which showed a quote in elegant script. Healing happens when we transform our pain into purpose, our silence into strength, our isolation into connection. I'm often asked whether I regret speaking up, Maya said, looking directly into the audience. Whether I think it was worth losing the family I thought I had, worth the years of therapy and legal battles and community judgment. Maya thought about the teenager she'd been, standing in her childhood kitchen, finally finding the courage to say that her father's comments were inappropriate. That girl had been so afraid, so convinced she was overreacting, so worried about causing problems for people she loved. Maya continued, "My answer is always the same. I didn't lose a family by speaking up. I discovered that what I thought was a family was actually a system designed to protect an abuser at the expense of his victims. Breaking that system allowed me to build something real and healthy in its place." Maya gestured toward Rebecca in the audience, toward her mother in the back row, toward the colleagues and friends who had become her chosen family. Today, I'm surrounded by people who love me because of my truth, not despite it. I work every day to create the safety and support I needed when I was 18.
I've learned that my voice has power, that my experiences matter, that speaking up for myself is actually speaking up for every child who needs an adult to believe them." Maya looked out at the audience of future advocates and change-makers. "Your voices matter too," she said. "Whether you're a survivor sharing your own story, a family member learning to support someone you love, or a professional working to create safer communities, your voice matters. The child who needs you to speak up may not even be born yet, but your courage today creates the foundation for their safety tomorrow." The applause that followed was sustained and heartfelt, but Maya barely heard it. She was thinking about the girl she'd been 5 years ago, afraid and confused and convinced she was crazy for feeling uncomfortable in her own home. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what she knew now, that trusting her instincts wasn't betrayal, that speaking truth wasn't destruction, that her voice was exactly strong enough to create the change she needed to see in the world. After the presentation, Maya mingled with audience members, answering questions and sharing resources. A young woman approached her, probably around 19, with the carefully controlled expression Maya recognized from her own reflection during those difficult early years. "Ms. Chen Martinez," the young woman said quietly, "I wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I'm dealing with something similar in my family. An uncle who makes comments that feel wrong, but everyone thinks he's just being affectionate." Maya felt her heart clench with recognition and determination. "What's your name?" Maya asked gently. "Jessica," the young woman said. "Jessica, I want you to know that you're not imagining things. Adults who make children feel uncomfortable with sexual comments or boundary violations are engaging in harmful behavior, regardless of their intentions or how other people interpret it." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a card with information about the youth center's services. "These are people who are trained to help," Maya said, handing Jessica the card. "They can help you figure out what steps feel right for you, whether that's talking to other family members, making a report, or just having someone to process your experiences with who will believe you." Jessica took the card with shaking hands. "What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being too sensitive?" Maya smiled sadly, remembering her father's exact words from 5 years ago. "Jessica," Maya said, "your discomfort is information. Your instincts are trying to protect you. Trust them. Even if other people don't understand, even if family members get upset, even if it causes problems, trust your own experience." "But what if it destroys my family?" Jessica asked, the question Maya had asked herself countless times. "What if staying silent destroys you? And what if speaking up actually saves your family from living a lie?" Maya watched Jessica walk away with the resource card clutched in her hand and felt the familiar mixture of heartbreak and hope that came with recognizing her younger self in another young person's struggle. 2 years later, Maya stood in the lobby of the state capitol building, holding a folder thick with testimonies from survivors, research data, and proposed policy changes. Today, she was scheduled to testify before a legislative committee considering a bill that would extend the statute of limitations for childhood abuse cases and mandate trauma-informed training for all adults working with children in institutional settings. Rebecca stood beside her, now Dr. Rebecca Chen Martinez, having completed her doctorate in clinical psychology with a specialization in family trauma. Their matching wedding rings caught the light as they held hands, a small anchor of stability in what could have been an overwhelming environment. "You ready for this?" Rebecca asked. Maya looked around the marble halls where laws were made, where policies that could protect or fail children were debated and decided. She thought about all the young people she'd worked with over the past 7 years, all the families that had been torn apart by abuse and secrecy, all the communities that had been forced to confront uncomfortable truths about trusted adults. "I'm ready," Maya said.
The hearing room was packed with advocates, survivors, family members, and lobbyists. Maya recognized faces from her years of advocacy work, other survivors who had found their voices, parents who had chosen to believe their children, and professionals who had dedicated their careers to child protection. When Maya's name was called, she approached the witness table with the same quiet confidence she'd developed during years of speaking truth to power. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 847, Maya began, looking directly at the committee members. My name is Maya Chen Martinez, and 7 years ago, I reported inappropriate sexual behavior by a trusted adult who held positions of authority over children in our community. Maya had told this story hundreds of times now, but each telling still carried the weight of that 18-year-old girl who had been so afraid to speak up. The investigation that followed my report revealed a pattern of boundary violations affecting 12 young women over a period of several years. It also revealed how easy it is for predatory behavior to hide in plain sight when communities aren't equipped to recognize warning signs or respond appropriately to disclosures. Maya opened her folder and pulled out a stack of letters. These are testimonies from survivors who couldn't be here today, young people who have aged out of the current statute of limitations, who discovered their voices too late to seek legal remedy for the harm they experienced. This bill would give them back their right to seek justice and would send a clear message that childhood abuse has lifelong impacts that deserve lifelong recognition. Maya began reading excerpts from the letters, voices of young people who had found healing through her advocacy work, but who remained trapped by laws that prioritized legal convenience over survivor justice. The second component of this bill, mandatory trauma-informed training for adults in positions of authority over children, grows directly from the lessons learned in my case. The adults who could have intervened earlier didn't recognize the warning signs. The systems that should have protected children weren't equipped to respond appropriately to reports of boundary violations. Maya clicked a remote and a presentation screen showed statistics from communities that had implemented similar training programs. In districts where trauma-informed training has been implemented, reports of inappropriate behavior have increased by 300%, not because abuse is increasing, but because adults are finally equipped to recognize it and respond appropriately. Early intervention protects children and prevents more serious abuse from occurring. One of the committee members raised her hand. Ms. Chen Martinez, what would you say to critics who argue that this legislation could lead to false accusations against innocent adults? Maya had been asked this question countless times, and her answer had been refined through years of advocacy and education. Senator Williams, trained investigators know how to distinguish between legitimate reports and false accusations. The bigger risk isn't false reports, it's the silence that allows real abuse to continue unchecked. In my case, if adults had been trained to recognize warning signs and respond appropriately to early disclosures, 11 other girls might have been spared the experience of inappropriate sexualization.
Maya concluded her testimony with words she'd spoken to audiences across the region. This legislation isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about creating systems that prioritize child safety over adult comfort, that believe survivors when they find the courage to speak up, and that recognize that protecting children requires all of us to be willing to see uncomfortable truths. The bill passed the committee by a unanimous vote, later passed both houses of the legislature, and was signed into law 6 months later. Maya was invited to attend the signing ceremony, where she stood behind the governor as he signed legislation that would protect countless children and support countless survivors. 10 years later, Maya sat in her office at the National Center for Child Advocacy, surrounded by awards, photos from speaking engagements, and artwork created by young people she'd worked with over the past decade. At 33, she had become a nationally recognized expert on childhood boundary violations and family trauma. But she still remembered exactly what it felt like to be a scared teenager who thought she might be losing her mind. A knock on her door interrupted her preparation for a video conference with advocates in 3 other states who were working to replicate her youth center model in their communities. "Come in," Maya called. Rebecca entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the smile that had sustained Maya through 10 years of marriage and countless advocacy battles. "How's the expansion planning going?" Rebecca asked, settling into the chair across from Maya's desk. "Good," Maya said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Portland is ready to open their center next month, and Phoenix is about 6 months behind them. It's incredible how quickly the model is spreading." The Safe Voice Youth Center had become a template for trauma-informed youth services, with 17 locations across 12 states and inquiries from organizations around the world. Each center was adapted to its local community needs, but all shared the core principles Maya had learned from her own experience: believe survivors, provide comprehensive support, and create spaces where young people's voices are centered and valued. "Any word on the documentary?" Rebecca asked. Maya nodded toward her computer screen where an email from the production company was open. "They want to start filming next month. Interviews with me, you, my mom, some of the young people we've worked with who are willing to share their stories." A major streaming service had approached Maya about creating a documentary about her case and its aftermath, focusing on the systems changes that had grown out of one teenager's decision to speak up. Maya had initially been hesitant about the publicity, but ultimately decided that the potential impact of reaching millions of viewers outweighed her personal discomfort. "Are you nervous about it?" Rebecca asked. Maya considered the question. A decade ago, the idea of having her story broadcast to millions of people would have been terrifying, but she'd learned that fear was often a sign she was moving in the right direction. "A little," Maya admitted, "but I keep thinking about all the young people who might see it and recognize their own experiences. If this documentary helps even one child find the courage to speak up, it will be worth it." Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Linda, now 61, and serving as the executive director of a statewide organization supporting families affected by abuse disclosures. "Saw the news about the documentary. So proud of you, sweetheart. Love, Mom." The relationship between Maya and her mother had become one of the unexpected gifts of her healing journey. Linda's willingness to confront her own complicity, to do the hard work of therapy and accountability, had created space for a relationship that was deeper and more honest than anything they'd shared before Maya's disclosure. "Maya," Rebecca said, pulling her attention back to the present, "do you ever think about what your life would have looked like if you hadn't spoken up?"
Maya leaned back in her chair, considering the question. She thought about the girl she'd been at 18, so afraid of rocking the boat, so convinced that keeping the peace was more important than protecting herself. "Sometimes," Maya said, "I think about how I would have gone to college carrying all that confusion and self-doubt, how I would have struggled in relationships because I'd never learned to trust my own instincts, how I would have probably ended up in therapy eventually anyway, trying to figure out why I felt so uncomfortable with myself and my family." Maya paused, looking at the photos on her desk, pictures from speaking engagements, graduation ceremonies for youth center participants, advocacy events where survivors had found their voices. "But mostly, I think about all the young people who are safer now because I spoke up," Maya continued. "All the families who've been able to heal because they had resources and support. All the communities that have become more aware of how abuse operates and how to prevent it." Maya stood up and walked to the window that overlooked a playground where children were laughing and playing under the supervision of adults who had all been trained in trauma-informed practices and appropriate boundary maintenance. You know what I really think about? Maya said, turning back to Rebecca. I think about how speaking up didn't destroy my family. It revealed what had already been broken and created space for something healthier to grow in its place. Maya thought about her chosen family: Rebecca, her mother, the colleagues who had become friends, the young people she'd mentored who were now mentoring others. She thought about the community of survivors and advocates who had rallied around her work, the network of support that had grown from one teenager's decision to trust her own experience. The documentary title is going to be Breaking the Silence, but I think it should be called Building the Voice, because that's what this work really is: helping people discover that their voices matter, that their experiences are valid, that speaking up for themselves is actually speaking up for everyone who needs someone to go first. Rebecca smiled and reached across to take Maya's hand. I think that's exactly what you've done, she said. Built a voice strong enough to change the world. Maya looked out at the playground again, at children who were growing up in a world where adults were better trained to protect them, where their disclosures would be taken seriously, where their voices would be believed and valued. Not just my voice, Maya said, our voices. Everyone who's chosen to speak up, to support survivors, to change systems, to believe children when they tell us uncomfortable truths. That's how change really happens, one voice at a time, until they become a chorus that can't be ignored. As the afternoon sun slanted through her office window, Maya felt the deep satisfaction that came from work aligned with purpose, from pain transformed into protection for others, from a voice that had started in whispered fear and grown into something powerful enough to change laws and save lives. She had kept her promise to that scared 18-year-old girl who had stood in her childhood kitchen and finally said no to inappropriate behavior. She had built a world where that girl's voice would have mattered from the beginning, where her experience would have been believed, where speaking up would have been seen as courage rather than betrayal. And in building that world, Maya had discovered something she'd never expected: that her voice had been strong enough all along. She just needed permission to use it. The documentary, Breaking the Silence, One Voice, Countless Lives, premiered 18 months later to critical acclaim and sparked a national conversation about childhood abuse prevention. Maya watched the premiere surrounded by survivors, advocates, family members, and young people whose lives had been changed by the work that had grown from a teenager's decision to trust her own experience and speak truth to power. As the credits rolled, Maya felt Rebecca squeeze her hand and heard her mother whisper, "I'm so proud of you," and saw dozens of young faces in the audience. Faces that belonged to children who would grow up safer because one person had decided that her voice mattered more than anyone else's comfort. The documentary ended with Maya speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this and you recognize your own experience in these stories, I want you to know something. You're not crazy, you're not oversensitive, and you're not alone. Your voice matters. Your experience is valid, and speaking up for yourself is one of the most powerful things you can do, not just for your own healing, but for every child who needs someone to go first.